Hello, everybody. Scott McEwen, Executive Director, Tualatin River Watershed Council. Welcome to the Tualatin Watershed. How many of you live in the Tualatin Watershed? How many of you work in the Tualatin Watershed? All right, good. How many of you know what subbasin of the Tualatin we're in? 4? Okay, all right. Welcome to the Beaver Creek Subbasin. Thank you, Bruce, to the Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec Department for this lovely facility. Before many of you came, some of us went on a tour of the nature park. It's incredible. If you take a little bit of time after this, take a little walk around. One of the things that I'm going to be talking about today, or what I'm going to be talking about today, is habitat connectivity. And what I experienced in this one nature park are 3 kind of core habitats. There's the wetlands and riparian, which is one of the things that some of the mapping is done. There's the forest and there's the oaks. So in this little ecosystem area, we have 3 wonderful representations of some of the most important habitats that we have in the Tualatin watershed. So thank you for coming here today. I've worked in a lot of different geographies. I grew up in Michigan in the upper Great Lakes area, worked in the lower Columbia, worked in the East Cascades. And the thing that I love the most about working in the Tualatin is the collaborative environment. I mean, this really is such a collaborative, partner-rich watershed where people really, I mean, we have our differences, but people really do work together every day. And I'm looking at the Tualatin River Keepers. I'm looking at Clean Water Services, the SWCD, Centro Cultural. There's so many different organizations that just naturally collaborate together. So it's a wonderful place to work. One of the things that we feel that we need to be doing is starting to organize ourselves around geographies. And habitat connectivity is one way to do that. So I'm going to talk about that now. And some of these slides, I'm not going to read them. I'm going to let you read them because I just don't want to drone on too much. So I'm just going to say, all right, so this is not one that I'm going to read. So just hopefully you can see that. This is our purpose. These are some of our members. There are many members, and I would say, within the Intertwine Alliance, I saw Teresa here. There are many members within the Intertwine Alliance, so that represents a lot of different partners. I'm also not going to read this, but when you read this, just let it wash over you, because for me, I read this and I just feel so good. So this quote comes from the Regional Strategic Action Plan, of which the Intertwine Alliance was the lead on. Many of the partners that are here today have worked on it over the last decade and a half. Lori has been one of the most stalwart advocates and people moving this project forward. And what we're trying to do here in the Tualatin Basin is take all of that learning, take all of that mapping, and bring it and sort of breathe life into that work in the Tualatin Basin and actually at the sub-basin scale. So what our work group, the Connected Habitats or the Habitat Connectivity Work Group, is focused on are these 3 things. Create spatial representations of potential priority areas for collective. So when we talk about collective action, collective restoration, conservation. So how can we organize ourselves around certain core geographies? We want to visualize patterns that are not explicitly clear on the ground. So there are a lot of places out in the landscape that are actually oak corridors that just maybe look like a subdivision. And so using GIS and the power of some of these analytics to identify these and visualize these habitats and these connected corridors is one of the things that we're working on. And then create conversations about what Tree for All priorities are as a collective and as individual organizations and how we can collaborate to achieve these priorities. So I'm going to get into some of what we're envisioning with the next slide. So envisioning connectivity, and I'm sure many of you who have taken classes in biodiversity have seen some of these slides. So, you can think about habitat connectivity in a linear manner where you've got some core or anchor habitats, or a lot of these terms that we use, and we've got a corridor. So the linear, maybe it can be a riparian corridor, a river corridor. It can be a ridge top. You could have, the Willamette River as a patch and the Coast Range as a patch, and have the Chehalem Ridge as a corridor, a terrestrial corridor. It could be aquatic corridor. You could also think about it in terms of infrastructure, how our roads are creating barriers to connectivity. So, there on the left, you've got no connectivity because you've got a highway. Rivers can serve as barriers as well. Mountain ranges can serve as barriers. So they're natural barriers as well as human-developed barriers. And you can have connected corridors through natural means, the one in the middle there, or you may have seen some of these overpasses, some of these highway overpasses, wildlife overpasses. So they're actually ways that you can use engineering and ecology to overcome some of these human-built barriers. And then finally, you can think about connectivity, habitat connectivity, as a mosaic. It's not so simple as a linear landscape, but it's actually a mosaic of different anchor habitats, core habitats, and connected corridors. So here we are in the Tualatin Basin, and here we are for those 5 people out there who knew that we were in the Beaverton Creek subbasin, and here we are right about here-ish. This is Huck 12, so one of the ways that people who work in watersheds organize things are around Huck's hydrologic units. So this is broken up by Huck 12s. And here is the Huck 12 of the Beaverton Creek watershed. And here we are, right? You see this dark patch here? This is the nature park here, and we're right here in the nature area. And you can see Beaverton Creek coming down here, and it connects with, I think, is that Bronson Creek? Rock Creek. Connects with Rock Creek here, and then flows down into the Tualatin River right here, just south of Hillsborough. So this colorful map is an illustration of what some of the findings are when we start applying concepts of habitat connectivity to the landscape. And Mitch, who is with Clean Water Services, has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but a lot of the work that Mitch is building off of has come from a decade or so of habitat mapping with the Intertwine Alliance, with Metro. So we're kind of building on this work, and now we're trying to deploy it into a finer and finer scale. So the red areas are areas that are conservation areas. It's ORCA, so that's outdoor recreation conservation areas. So those permanently conserved areas, they could be parks, they could be natural areas. And so those could be considered anchor habitats or core habitats. And maybe one of the things that we can envision is how do we want to connect core habitats? And so the yellow areas here are then connectivity corridors, but there's not a lot to tell you with that. I mean, Forest Park, which is up here, it's a lot of forest connectivity up there. But then there are other areas. And so the next map then shows kind of what that looks like when you break out these different habitat connections. So the blue are the wetland and riparian corridors. So those use the surrogate species of beaver and a frog. What was the frog? Red-legged frog, thank you. So those 2 surrogate species were modeled, and these are the corridors that those species were found to, those species would utilize these corridors. So, up here in headwater streams, as well as down in the lower floodplain, valley floor areas. The green areas are forest. So obviously Forest Park, there's a lot of forest connectivity there. And then the orange are oak. So as I said, a lot of these oak areas are actually in subdivisions, which is really curious. Why, what are the species that are surrogates for the oak habitats?
Western bay squirrels.
Nuthatch.
Okay, so the nuthatch can jump from tree to tree in a subdivision, right? Squirrel's gonna have a little bit harder time crossing roads, obviously. But you start to see some stories in the landscape. You start to see some puzzle pieces that start to kind of fit together. And some of the next stages that we're going to be taking is at a Huck 12 level is start looking deeper into, well, what are some of maybe the corridors that we'd want to prioritize? And so what it could look like, as an example, and this is completely made up in Scott McEwen's head. It's not been vetted. It's my best professional judgment only. But if you think about if the nature area, which is composed of 3 different habitats, the wetland riparian, the oak, and the forest, if that's kind of an anchor or core habitat, and maybe there's some other ones down here, you've got a whole series of patches of oak habitats, a wetland riparian, and a forested. And is there some kind of geography that we can kind of come up with that we say, yes, we agree, there's an agreement that this is kind of a core area, habitat connectivity corridor that we want to work on collectively? And what does that then look like? So that's kind of where we are now, is kind of working at the Huck 12 level, coming up with envisioning those corridors, and then ultimately going through a prioritization exercise. GIS is wonderful, but the map is not the territory. But Mitch has been able to pull out some metrics for us. So when we're thinking about goals over the next 20 years, what would be some of the goals that we would be coming up with in the Beaverton Creek area? So we know that the total size of the Huck 12 of Beaverton Creek is about 24,000 acres. And within that, we've got these ORCA areas or core conservation areas, about 550. We've got this number of wetland, oak, and forested areas. So those are the acreages of the habitat connectivity corridors that GIS can tell us, but there's a lot more to fill out that story. And then finally, the challenges and next steps, very much like what Bruce was saying with the tree canopy. Okay, this is a lot of great science, super interesting. A lot of the partners that I see at a lot of these meetings are here. And how do we broaden that? How do we get down into the community and try to inspire some of this vision, understand from those communities what their needs are? How do we sort of breathe humans into this concept and not just have it all just be a GIS exercise? And then who are those non-traditional partners? Washington County is, I think, the most diverse county in Oregon. I don't know if that is correct, but it certainly seems super diverse. So how can we engage with some of those non-traditional allies and have them part of this storytelling and part of this collective action? So thank you.